In this morning's Your Voice, Your Vote, we're speaking one-on-one with Democratic Senate candidate Sinema that you will only see here on KGUN 9. Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
It is my pleasure to be here.
Well, I'd like to begin this morning by talking about voter turnout. So a new survey out there is kind of talking about that older voters are actually doubling the number of younger voters at the polls. So if a young voter is watching us this morning, have this conversation at home, and they're not planning on going to the polls, what do you tell them?
Oh my goodness. They have to vote, because your vote is actually your voice. And if you choose not to vote, then you're letting someone else make decisions about your life and your future. I don't know about you, but I don't want anyone else making decisions for me. So I would encourage all young voters to get out and vote. And in fact, they can vote early in person today, or they can make a plan to vote in person on Tuesday. So there are lots of options to vote. But you know what's some good news? We've just seen this data coming in over the last couple days. Pima County is voting like gangbusters. So congrats to folks in Tucson because they're voting at high rates. We're also seeing an increase in the number of new voters, people who are voting for the first time ever, and the largest group amongst them, 18 to 34-year-olds. So in Arizona, young people are starting to vote.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think they understand how high the stakes are in this election. The choices are so clear in some of these tough races, including my own. And I think young people are worried about things like healthcare and education, and they want to make sure that they're electing someone who will fight for them and take care of them and their families.
All right. Well, as we know, massive caravans of migrants are making their way to the United States from Central America right now. What are your thoughts, I'm curious, on border security?
Well, as someone who was born and raised right here in Tucson, as a native of Southern Arizona, we've been dealing with a border crisis for the last 30+ years. So the movement of people into our country is nothing new for us. I think it's important for us to keep focused on what it's our country's duty to do, which is to secure the border and make sure we're not letting bad people in, like the cartels, Sinaloa and MS-13, but that we're also creating visas to allow good people to come in and be workers. In terms of the caravan, it's our duty to get a bunch of judges down to the border so we can decide the cases as quickly as possible when people present themselves at the border and ask for permission to come into our country.
All right, let's talk about health care. That's one of your big pushes.
That's right.
If you are elected, what would you change? What's your plan for health care?
I'm so glad you've asked it because it's the #1 issue that Arizonans talk to me out on the campaign trail about. And the first thing we have to do is protect the important provisions that people have today. Folks tell me they're paying too much for health care, they can't afford the premiums or the copays, but they're grateful that they can have protection if they have a pre-existing condition. So if your kid has asthma or your mom has diabetes, right now you can get coverage. You can't be denied coverage, but that's under threat. And the House of Representatives has voted several times to take that away. This is a key difference between Martha and I. I want to protect those health care benefits for Arizonans, and she's voted to take them away. So that's #1. But #2, we've got to work to make sure that we're lowering the costs and making health care more accessible for Arizonans.
Why do you decide to do that?
Well, this is really personal for me. When I was a kid, my family faced really difficult times, and we were actually homeless for a time. And during those difficult times, when my family was struggling financially, we didn't have health insurance for a while. So I know how important it is to make sure that you can get your kid to a doctor. I don't think families should have to choose between paying the rent and getting medicine for their kids. We've got to make sure that every Arizonan can get access to affordable care.
If we're sitting here 1 year from today and you are elected, what would be your most proud moment?
I'm so glad you've asked that question because the answer is one that people have heard from me on the campaign trail over the last 13 years of public service in Arizona. The #1 most important thing we have to do in our country is get Republicans and Democrats to work together. The challenges we face in our country are so significant that the ugliness and the chaos and the fighting that you see today is actually hurting our country's progress, not helping. And I've got a proven track record of bringing people together of different political opinions to solve problems. That's what I hope will be my greatest achievement in 1 year as a U.S. Senator, is bringing people together and just solving problems.
All right. Thanks so much for taking the time. Appreciate
Thanks.
it. All right, Whitney.